Hello, and welcome to the Espace Publication podcast, a show dedicated to commercial real estate right here in Quebec. It's a pleasure and an honor to introduce my new partner for the podcast, Mr. Andrew Cross, who is the publisher and owner of Espace Publication, Montreal-based magazine. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Axel. It's great to be here. We're really excited to get this podcast going, and we're really looking forward to working together to get the story of Montreal's real estate out beyond into the world. So thank you very much.
Exactly. So as I had mentioned last week, there's some changes coming with the podcast. So Espace Publication has a quarterly magazine about the Montreal specific commercial real estate market. And with the podcast, we've decided to get together so we can have some of the guests from the magazines on the podcast and continue to bring you great content that's relevant to you here locally. So there's so much we both want to share with our audience here. Before we do that, I just want to kind of set the stage a little bit. As you mentioned, it's been 35 years that the magazine is published, that you publish it. First of all, like, how in the world did you get into publishing a real estate magazine?
Well, it's a long story, Axel. I mean, I've probably forgotten most of it by now, but it goes back when I finished university. I got a job working for a business magazine selling advertising. And funnily enough, most of my clients were commercial real estate clients.
Wow.
And I quickly did that for about 9 months. And then the magazine was taken over by a factoring company. And it was basically on its way to bankruptcy after 9 months. So I'd have to say in that 9 months, I certainly learned a lot about what not to do in running a magazine. But I was introduced to a fellow in Toronto called Dennis Alexander, who was publishing the Toronto Office Guide at the time. And the Toronto Office Guide was a huge magazine, a big catalog of maybe almost 200 pages. And he wanted to get involved in Montreal. So I partnered with him, and we launched the Montreal Office Guide, or the Guide du Bureau de Montréal Office Guide. So that was in 1988, actually. So we worked together. And we're luckily enough, there were many of the same clients in Montreal and Toronto. So we were introduced to many of the clients through the Toronto publication, and we got to know them here. So these are companies like Marathon Realties and other companies that are not in the market anymore necessarily. But then in the early 90s, we had a terrible recession in real estate. And the Toronto Office Guide actually closed in 1991. And they went from having 70 ad pages to 4 ad pages. Ooh. In Montreal, we had peaked at 30 ad pages, and we went down to 18 or 19 pages. So it was still a viable publication in Montreal. And with the Toronto one closing, I basically made a deal with the publisher in Toronto that I would make sure that all of his bills were paid and everything like that, and that I would take over the magazine in Montreal myself and rebrand it. That's when we rebranded it Espace Montréal with the big S to signify that it's a bilingual magazine. So that's how Espace basically started in late 1991. I was 24, 25 years old and went to all of my clients at the time. Actually, it's advice that my father gave me the advice to go see all your clients and say that for a fiduciary responsibility, that we are changing the name. It's going to be the same type of magazine. I'll become the publisher of it, but declare it with all of our clients. And every single client that I went to said, fine, you continue doing it. We like the magazine. And they gave me the vote of confidence right away. I think I had gotten to know many of them. They became good friends of mine. And so after 3 years, I was basically able to continue doing the magazine, and we launched Espace Montreal.
And so that was in early 1992, and now it's basically 34 years later, and it's really developed into the mouthpiece for commercial real estate in Montreal. So that's how I was fortunate enough to get the company going myself, and it's interesting. It was not easy at the beginning because, of course, that was a very deep recession that we went into. But again, we had the trust and the faith of all the Montreal developers and strangely enough, Montreal wasn't as significantly affected by that recession as Toronto. Toronto was a boom and bust market. So it busted hard. Whereas Montreal, we didn't bust that hard. But what was coming from Montreal, however, was probably even worse than in Toronto, because
The referendum?
the referendum, of course, was really a low point for real estate in Montreal, and many of the developers and people in the market were saying, it's not going to be easy. We have to. They had a saying back then, actually, in the North American real estate market. The saying was "survive to 95."
Oh,
in
wow.
Montreal, the peak, because from the early 90s, everybody knew that there would be 3 bad years, basically. So, but in Montreal, it bottomed in 1995 with the referendum, and it was a very dark time for commercial real estate in Montreal. So, but we were able to get through that, and it's interesting to see how the cycles work. After 35 years, we really follow the cycles, and there's always challenges, I would say. I mean, in the 90s, what was incredible was the comeback, basically, from 95. 95, we saw a whole new wave of investors come to Montreal from New York and from elsewhere, who came in and saw this fantastic market, and the prices were so low.
Yeah.
They were buying it, for pennies on the dollar, essentially. These are companies like Busac, like Time Equities. They were coming here, and for example, Time Equities had bought 4,200 Saint Laurent for, I think it was $7 a foot, which is about 1/3 of a year's rent in the building right now. So, and Busac themselves had purchased Place du Puy and 1200 McGill College from the Caisse de Dépôt, who themselves didn't believe in the market anymore, and they sold out to the Americans coming in to buy these properties. So that was a whole new wave of people who came into the market, and the market itself began to recover in the late 90s, going into 2001.
Yeah.
So, which we had another drop in the market, was when the .com crash, or the stock market crashed. So Montreal, the market had picked up, and then we had another hit with the .com crash coming in 2000. So that, again, it's the cycles of the market, and it's funny to see that what was originally an institutional market, we had many. In the early 90s, there were many insurance companies, financial institutions, even American institutions like Prudential and Prudential of England, Allstate. All these different developers were here, and they had basically there was a formula in the 80s and 90s for developing, where private developers would partner with financial institutions to build buildings, because they were building buildings.
Yeah.
And what happened is they overbuilt the office market, essentially, in the late 80s and early 90s. So that's one of the biggest negative factors that can affect a real estate market, is really overbuilding.
The oversupply.
We've seen that in the condo market recently this decade.
Yeah.
But they overbuilt the office market. There would be no office construction, essentially, except for the odd built-to-suit building, for another 20 years after the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, the market had to absorb that.
They had to absorb it. So there was a change in the capital stack, and a change in the ownership in the market. So when everything went bankrupt, a lot of private developers went bankrupt in the early and mid 90s. And so those companies were taken over, the buildings were foreclosed on by the mortgage holders, which were life insurance companies and banks. So they had huge portfolios of office buildings coming from this bust in the market. But what happened was, by the turn of the century, you had pension funds and a new phenomenon, which was REITs, come into the market. And so the pension funds and the REITs essentially took out the capital stack from the financial institutions and life insurance companies, and they were the ones coming into the market, building portfolios. This was when the rise of the Caisse de Dépôt in real estate, the rise in
PSP.
PSP was a bit later, but then the Ontario pension funds were partnered with companies like Oxford to come into the market here, and they purchased a lot of buildings.
Yeah.
So by the turn of the century, there was a new group of developers led by the REITs and led by the pension funds coming in to the market. So many of the mainstays of Montreal's classic developers, like Trizec sold in 1999. they sold out to the Caisse de Dépôt, who purchased Place Ville-Marie and the other main Trizac properties that they had developed since the early 60s. So that's where the continuing evolution of the market continues. Basically, through the first early decade of the new millennium, we saw basically cap rate compression, which meant that any building that you bought, you would have done very well on, because the cap rates were compressing all the time. So anyone buying buildings saw the value of the buildings go way up during those times. So those were relatively good times again in the office market going through the early part of the new millennium, until of course the next challenge, which was the great financial crisis, which really struck in 2009. Now, so the office market in Montreal was thriving in 2008, and then suddenly came tumbling down again. And again, we saw
a cycle.
Yeah, it's a cycle. Yeah. So the next thing to change was that the pension funds and the owners that were in the market started to come out of the market in the second decade of the new millennium, which is where we saw the rise of private investors again come back to the market. So this is where the group Max of the world began to become big players in terms of they were starting to buy things, Petra, and then the syndicators, the buildings like the companies like Redburn became big players and built huge portfolios. Excuse me, in Montreal.
Yeah. Now, and it's interesting to hear this evolution over time, because in the 35 years of, publishing the magazine, you've built a lot of relationships with a lot of these developers, financiers, and you've had, in a way, firsthand that evolution in front of you happening, and now you're able to share it with us, and enhance why it really benefits, both the podcast and the magazine to be able to share these human stories, because that's really what it's about.
Well, we're very fortunate. We're very fortunate that we've been allowed. They have confidence in us. They trust us to be able to tell their story. And that's what I've worked on over the years, is to build that trust with the developers in the market, many of whom I've known since they started in their careers at this point, many of whom we've either placed in their jobs or helped them find the right position, because we know the companies, we know the people, and we can often put that together in terms of seeing who's going to work out well. So luckily, again, they've had the confidence in me and the trust in me to keep us in there and allow us to tell their story. And that's what's happened there. So in the past decade, again, we've seen the rise of what now you would call the family office, the high net worth individuals who've established family offices, which have now replaced, again, the capital stack from the institutions, and which are not in the market anymore in terms of commercial real estate, especially post-COVID. So these, and even the REITs, there's still certain REITs like Allied who are very successful here and still doing very well. But other ones like Communar are not any longer REITs. But Communar went through a phenomenal growth phase where they became the largest player in the market. And then it just kind of imploded in terms of getting out, selling buildings, and not really being able to work in that way anymore. So what we've seen is, again, the rise of what I would say is the family office, which is the leading provider of capital in today's commercial real estate market. There are some institutions who are still active and have always been there. So there's certain players who haven't left, like Sun Life, for example, and other companies like that who are still active in the market, are still big owners in the market. But we've really seen this whole capital stack change over the years. So through the evolution, the crashes and the booms in the market, it's really led to where we are today in terms of in the office market.
And throughout time, the magazine has always been able to maintain and grow its reader base.
Yes.
Grow its advertising base.
Yes.
And so now the publications, there's two magazines. The Montreal one is 4 times a year.
Yeah.
And the Quebec one is twice a year.
Yeah. In Quebec City, we've been in the market there for 30 years. Quebec City is a very unique, very special, and very successful market, I would say. It's a tightly knit market. It's a small enough market that everybody knows everybody in it. So those players there They know it well. They understand it well. And again, they do very well playing it. And Quebec City has really prospered in the past, I would say 15 to 20 years. And it's a beautiful, unique market. But, you know, when it comes right down to it, it's the buildings don't move. The buildings stay where they are. That's one thing I've learned, philosophically speaking.
Yeah.
But the people change, and the people who run the buildings change. And again, it takes a special group of people to be successful over a certain period of time in these markets. And what we're very privileged to be able to stay close to the veterans in the market and be able to work with the younger players in the market as well. So we're always open and to the companies that are coming into it, and really are a platform to share their success with the market. I mean, that's what we want to tell with the magazine, is to give people the story of what a great market Montreal is, and that we want people to be a part of it, and that these people are working, 24/7 to provide their tenants with the best possible space, that they can, and they are dedicated to the market, and that's why they're successful. And those are the stories that we tell in Espace Montreal, along with market reports and industry association news. We work with all the associations. If it's UDI Quebec, BOMA Quebec, and CRU Montreal, we're very proud to be strong supporters of these institutions. And we work with all of the major brokerage firms. So that's another evolution that we've seen in the market, is how the brokerage firms and really commercial real estate services have evolved over the past 35 years, where when we started, there were traditional ICI brokers, and then the tenant consultants came into the market. Tenant consultants were, in the day, companies like Leopold Properties Consultants and Devoncore, who were the leaders in terms of this tenant consultation, which now makes up, I would say, not a majority, but a good chunk of the commercial real estate company's business is tenant consultation. And now the services have expanded to include landlord representation on the other side, which is a growing phenomenon today, along with project management and asset management and other services like this, so that the successful commercial real estate brokers have really evolved to serve their clients.
Yeah, there's been a real evolution in the market in that sense.
Yeah.
We're now handling tenants, and especially on the office side.
Yeah.
And really tailoring the building to what those companies need. So just going back to the magazine. So magazine shares stories of developers and news of what's happening in the Montreal market.
Yeah.
And also has a transactional report that's quite important.
We have that's uniquely, again, we have a transaction report in the back of our magazine. So a lot of people in the industry read the magazine backwards.
Yeah.
They go to the transactions first and see what the transactions are before getting back to the magazine. And again, this is information that comes from the developers and owners and property managers in the market to go through all the leasing transactions in the market, not the sales transactions, which is a different thing, but the leasing transactions, which is a really a key element to what we provide. I mean, we provide an information package that includes the transactions, that includes the listings of all the available space in the office, industrial, and retail markets. So, and then at the front of the magazine, it's interviews, it's market reports, it's association news, and professional articles as well. So we work closely with legal firms and taxation and family office specialists on taxation, like Richter, who are very these are the leading professionals in the market. And again, we're very fortunate to be able to publish articles from these leading professionals that really help our readers out.
Top-notch quality.
Yeah, so that's it. We try to provide a very high quality publication that gives people information that they really need if they're in the commercial real estate market. So
for the people who are listening right now who maybe haven't heard yet of Espace Montréal, we're partnering up the magazine and the podcast.
Yeah.
In what way do you think this synergy is going to help us both?
Well, I think we're, after 34 years, we have the print publication. We have an online publication now, which we're getting 4,000 or 5,000 readers per issue. And I think, to take it to the next level, to stay in touch with a new generation of readers, of listeners, I think it's important that we get into the podcast business. And really, we're very fortunate to have met yourself because, again, you're an established podcaster in the Montreal market for the past 4 years. And again, it really, I think our values are really aligned in terms of being able to tell the story. And what we can bring to you is the content. We can bring you the leaders. We can bring you, a higher level of content, I think, and focus it more on commercial. But we still do multi-residential in terms of we cover the investment market for multi-res, the institutional market for multi-res, the development market for multi-res. So that means all the bigger players, the bigger buildings that are being built. That's part of our purview at Espace Montreal, is to get that into our information mix as well. So for us, I think it's going to help us get into that multi-res market more by working with you. And I think that there's a lot of synergies there. And again, we can bring fantastic guests to the table. And I think we've seen that now just today in terms of the first lineup of people that we're bringing in include
some big names,
some very big names in terms of Brett Miller from Canderel, Jean-Marc Dubé from Colliers, and George Armoyan from Nexarm, who is just doing the redevelopment of the Standard Life's former head office building on Sherbrooke Street. So that's going to be a fabulous story. And then the other two are absolutely the leaders in their field, in their domain. So I think that's what we can really bring to the table. Like that.
And the vision, because Andrew and I spend quite a bit of time in the office discussing what we want to do with this. And the idea is really to continue positioning both the podcast and the magazine as a centerpiece where thought leaders and CEOs of the real estate industry in Montreal can come and share their vision, share what they're working on, and be their mouthpiece. And I'm very proud to be a part of this. So Andrew, it's only the beginning, but I'm already thankful that we've been able to put this together. Just recording this first episode today took quite a bit of time. And I think, for the listeners out there, they have our commitment that we're going to be working hard at it to bring them quality guests and interesting topics that are relevant to them for the local industry.
Yeah, no, we're really, really excited. And I think it brings together the credibility and experience of Espace Montreal with your podcasting experience. And this can only be a plus. It creates more touch points for the community, for the readers, for the listeners, for the followers. And it can help elevate the industry dialogue to ensure that Montreal remains a leader in commercial real estate thought leadership. Now, Montreal has always been a testing ground, a proving ground, a learning place, just like we have 4 universities here that send people out across the world. Montreal's real estate community has really been a great place for people to learn who've gone on to run not just the Toronto markets, but the Chicago, the LA, and New York even. So we've sent out many different well-trained people who've learned their skills here in Montreal. And that's the legacy that Montreal has. So it's a great place to work. It's a great place to live. And it's a great place to learn real estate.
Yeah. And it's a great place to podcast and share all those stories.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, thank you very much for coming on today.
Thank you, Axel. We're very excited about this.
Yeah, me too. And this is the beginning of a good long journey. I just want to remind everyone, if you haven't heard and if you haven't read the magazine yet, you better get going with it. I will put the link in the show notes. Espace Publication, and the Montreal magazine is Espace Montréal. It's bilingual. It's got a lot of relevant information. I strongly advise you to come and check it out. And if you don't know where to find it, reach out to me and I'll make sure that you get a copy.
Great.
So,
Andrew, thank you very much, Axel. This has been fantastic, and I really look forward to getting this going, and we're very excited about it.
Me too. I'm very, very, very excited to get going. Thank you very much from wherever you're listening to, and keep listening, and I'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.